And the
Good evening from
show
Washington,
begins.
D.C., and welcome to this unique event, the CNN Univision Democratic Presidential Debate with the two leading candidates for the Democratic nomination, former Vice
There's no fucking audience. I hope to God I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong that there's no audience, but wow, what an intro. This shit show's already started, guys.
President Joe Biden and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders candidates. Welcome, it's good to have you. I'm Jake Tapper, along with CNN's Dana Bash and Univision's Ilya Calderon.
We come together tonight at an extraordinary time in our country when people are worried about far more than just presidential politics. We're in a national emergency because of the devastating global pandemic of coronavirus. It has killed nearly 6,000 people around the world. And 65 dead and more than 3,300 known cases here in the United States. As a result, tonight's debate will focus heavily on the crisis.
The setting of this debate is also different. To reduce unnecessary risk of transmission of the virus, CNN, Univision, the Democratic National Committee, and the campaigns moved this debate from Phoenix, Arizona, to here at CNN studios in Washington without any audience.
And all of this comes, of course, as four more states, Florida, Arizona, Ohio, and Illinois, prepare to vote on Tuesday, with Vice President Biden currently leading Senator Sanders in the race for delegates. Here's what we're going to do tonight. Each of you will have 90 seconds to answer questions and 45 seconds for responses and rebuttals. As much as we can, we hope this will be a conversation between the two of you.
All right, so I was right. There is no audience. There's no feedback from the public at all whatsoever under the pretense of coronavirus. All right, fine. I guess you fooled most of America with that bullshit. All right, so let's get back into it. A discussion, a conversation. All right, let's hear it.
So let's begin with the most important issue right now, the coronavirus, and what you would do as president in the face of it. Vice President Biden, let me start with you. We're in a reality right now that might have seemed unimaginable a week ago. Schools have been canceled for more than 25 million students. Grocery store shelves have been cleared out. March Madness, NBA games, Disney parks, Broadway, small businesses all shut down. And just today, the CDC issued a new recommendation that for the next 8 weeks, events that consist of 50 people or more throughout the U.S. be canceled or postponed. What do you say to the American people who are confronting this new reality?
First of all, my heart goes out to those who have already lost someone or those who are suffering from the virus. And this is bigger than any one of us. This calls for a national rallying to everybody move together. And, I laid out in detail what I would do if were I president today. You can go to joebiden.com, and I laid it out in significant detail. But there are three pieces of this. First of all, I have to take care of those who, in fact, are exposed or likely to be exposed to the virus. And that means we have to do testing. We have to get the testing kits up and ready. I would have the World Health Organization. I'd take advantage of the test kits they have available to us, even though the president says 1 million or more are coming. Let's just get all the tests we can done as quickly as we can. Secondly, I would make sure that every state in the union had at least 10 places where they had drive-through testing arrangements. I would also, at this point,
You do realize Trump has done drive-through arrangements for virtually every Walmart, CVS, and Walgreens. But somehow Biden thinks that 10 per state is going to be sufficient. Yeah, right.
Deal with the need to begin to plan for the need for additional hospital beds. We have that capacity in the Department of Defense as well as with the FEMA. And they can set up 100-bed, 500-bed hospitals in tents quickly. We have to lay all that out. But we have to deal with the economic fallout quickly. And that means making sure the people who, in fact, lose their job, don't get a paycheck, can't pay their mortgage, are able to pay it and pay them now and do it now. Small businesses be able to borrow interest-free loans. I see my time is up here. You're going to hold us tightly, I assume. But that's what I would do. Go to joebiden.com. It lays out precisely what I would do were I president today.
Senator Sanders, this morning, Dr. Anthony
You know what? No, I'm not going to criticize them until I hear both. Let's go on.
Fauci acknowledged that it's possible that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans could die from the coronavirus in a worst-case scenario. If you were president right now, what's the most important thing you would do tonight to try to save American lives?
Well, first thing we have got to do, whether or not I'm president, is to shut this president up right now, because he is undermining the doctors and the scientists who are trying to help the American people. It is unacceptable for him to be blabbering with unfactual information, which is confusing the general public. Second of all, what we need to do, and I'm glad that he has called a state of national emergency, what we have got to do is move aggressively to make sure that every person in this country finally understands that when they get sick with the coronavirus, that all payments will be made, that they don't have to worry about coming up with money for testing. They don't have to worry about coming up with money for treatment. This is an unprecedented moment in American history. Now, I obviously believe in Medicare for all. I will fight for that as president. But right now, in this emergency, I want every person in this country to understand that when you get sick, you go to the doctor. When you get sick, if you have the virus, that will be paid for. Do not worry about the costs right now, because we're in the middle of a national emergency. Second of all, we have to make sure that our hospitals have the ventilators that they need, have the IC units that they need. Right now, we have a lack of medical personnel, and I worry very much that if there is a peak, whether we have the capability of dealing with the hundreds of thousands of people who may be in hospitals. So we need unprecedented action right now to deal with the unprecedented crisis. And bottom line, from an economic point of view, what we have got to say to the American people, if you lose your job, you will be made whole. You're not going to lose income. If Trump can or the Fed can put $1.5 trillion into the banking system, we can protect the wages of every worker in America.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Biden,
All right, so let me get this straight. None of you bozos, in fact, I distinctly recall them saying that it was racist and, offensive that Trump did a travel ban from Europe and now the UK, when what they haven't realized is that virtually everyone who has it now has been in the airports, which is like ground zero for infection right now. Representatives from, I believe it's Trudeau's wife has it, Bolsonaro has the virus, a ton of dignitaries, the NBA has it because they're traveling for their games. Going to an airport is ground zero for an infection for this virus. They're not talking about closing the borders or stopping travel or even cleaning out the airports. They're too busy throwing out the Gibbs. So,
Trump says he does not take any responsibility for the problems with coronavirus testing, in part because he says he inherited so many rules, regulations, and red tape. Did bureaucratic red tape hamper this response in any way?
No, look, the World Health Organization offered the testing kits that they have available and to give it to us now. We refused them. We did not want to buy them. We did not want to get them from them. We wanted to make sure we had our own. I think he said something like, we have the best scientists in America, or something to that effect. The idea that we are not prepared for this and the other thing I want to point out, and I agree with Bernie, we're in a situation where we have to now be providing for the hospitals that are going to be needed now. The present system cannot handle the surge that is likely to come. So we should already be sitting down and planning where we're going to put these temporary hospitals. And we can do that. We did that. We've been through this before with the coronavirus. We've been through this before. We've been through this before with dealing with the viruses that the N1H15, as well as what happened in Africa.
Yeah, that virus where you and Obama pretended it didn't exist for so long, and we racked a death toll that was ridiculous because you literally didn't do fuck all with it until it was literally too fucking late. But I do digress.
We provided these hospitals dealing with these great pandemics, and we were able to do it quickly, and people would have a place to go. But we also have to provide the equipment to protect the first responders, and that's not being done either.
Senator Sanders, On that note, and you both of you have addressed this, but obviously another major health concern right now for officials is the potential surge in patients all at once, overburdening hospitals, the healthcare system. You've mentioned ICU beds, both of you, and ventilators. We're already in the middle of flu season, so already a lot of those beds and ventilators are already being used. If you were president right now, what would you do to make sure every sick American is able to get treatment so the U.S. does not suffer the same fate as Italy, where doctors have to decide right now who gets life-saving treatment and who does not?
Jake, let's be honest and understand that this coronavirus pandemic exposes the incredible weakness and dysfunctionality of our current healthcare system. Now, we're spending twice as much for...
Yeah, that current healthcare system was created by Obama and Biden. Let's not put that at the feet of Trump. Before Obamacare, we had actually affordable care. So I don't know what the fuck Bernie's going on about.
Person on healthcare is the people of any other country. How in God's name does it happen that we end up with 87 million people who are uninsured or underinsured, and there are people who are watching this program tonight who say, I'm not feeling well. Should I go to the doctor, but I can't afford to go to the doctor? What happens if I am sick? It's going to cost thousands of dollars for treatment. Who's going to feed my kids? We are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. We're spending so much money, and yet we are not even prepared for this pandemic. How come we don't have enough doctors? How come hospitals in rural areas are shutting down? How come people can't afford to get the prescription drugs they need because we have a bunch of crooks who are running the pharmaceutical industry, ripping us off every single day? And I'll tell you something right now.
Yeah, what he doesn't tell you is that the pharmaceutical companies are currently at war with Donald Trump because he wants to expose, He wants to lower the cost of the medication. That's one thing he wants to do. But another thing is the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies go hand in hand with the people running the hospitals. Trump wants to hold the hospitals accountable for their finances and what they charge people. He wants their charges and their fees to be public, which means you have to know what you're buying and how much it is before they can actually charge you. So I don't know where Bernie's going off and saying that Trump is somehow in bed with the pharmaceutical companies, because they're at war with everyone, and even Trump has given them hell.
In the midst of this epidemic, you got people in the pharmaceutical industry are saying, oh, wow, what an opportunity to make a fortune. So the word has got to go out, and I certainly would do this as president. You don't worry, people of America, do not worry about the cost of prescription.
And yet Trump got Walmart, 2 pharmaceutical companies, Walgreens, CVS, so on and so forth, to provide coronavirus test kits for free at no cost to you. I don't know how the hell they're making money off this, but I need to, if they're making money off this, I need to learn that magic.
Drugs, do not worry about the cost of the health care that you're going to get, because we are a nation, a civilized, democratic society. Everybody, rich and poor, middle class, will get the care they need. The drug companies will not rip us off.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Biden, some medical experts are saying the only true way to control this virus is through a national quarantine, requiring every American other than essential personnel to stay home. Would you take that unprecedented step of a national lockdown?
What I would do is what we did in our administration. I would call a meeting in the Situation Room of all the experts in America dealing with this crisis. I would sit them down and I would do exactly what we did then. What is it that we need? Listen to the experts. What do we need? And with all due respect to Medicare for all, you have a single payer system in Italy. It doesn't work there. It has nothing to do with Medicare for all. That would not solve the problem at all. We can take care of that right now by making sure that no one has to pay for treatment, period, because of the crisis. No one has to pay for whatever drugs are needed, period, because of the crisis. No one has to pay for hospitalization because of the crisis, period. That is a national emergency, and that's how it's handled. It is not working in Italy right now, and they have a single-payer system. Now, with regard to what else I would do, the fact is that we're in a position where I would bring together the leading experts in the world Instead of doing this in the United States, instead of doing this piecemeal, sit down and do what we did before with the Ebola crisis. What is needed? And have one voice, like we did every day we met in that crisis in the Situation Room, laying out, so we lay out overall, for all the nation, what the best proposal is and how to move forward. In the absence of that, governors are making some sound decisions. They're doing the best they can by going out and getting the healthcare experts in their communities and their states to move. But it should be directed from the White House, from the Situation Room, laying out in detail like we did in the Ebola crisis, and we beat it.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, your response?
Well, first of all, the dysfunctionality of the current healthcare system is obviously apparent. As I said earlier, there are people who hesitate to go to the doctor. You're going to have a maze of regulations. Well, if this is my income, if that's my income, can I get it? Can I not get it? Clearly, we are not prepared, and Trump only exacerbates the crisis.
I don't see how Trump has exacerbated this crisis. Biden's actually right. Italy has to make choices about who gets to live and die, but I don't see how Trump has made this any worse. In fact, if anything, he's done a great service to the country. But let's see what the dirty old socialist has to say about it.
When we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare as any other nation, one might expect that we would have enough doctors all over this country. One might expect that we would have affordable prescription drugs. One might expect that we are preparing effectively for a pandemic, that we were ready with the ventilators, with the ICUs, with the test kits that we need. We are not. And bottom line here is, in terms of Medicare for all, despite what the vice president is saying, what the experts tell us is that one of the reasons that we are unprepared and have been unprepared is we don't have a system. We got thousands of private insurance plans. That is not a system that is prepared to provide health care to all people. In a good year, without the epidemic, we're losing up to 60,000 people who die every year because they don't get to a doctor on time. And clearly this crisis is only making a bad situation worse.
That has nothing to do when you're in a national crisis. The national crisis says we're responding. It's all free. You don't have to pay for a thing. That has nothing to do with whether or not you have an insurance policy. This is a crisis. We're at war with the virus. We're at war with the virus. It has nothing to do with co-pays or anything. We just passed a law saying that you do not have to pay for any of this, period.
That's not true. As a matter of fact, that's not true. That law has enormous loopholes. I understand that Nancy Pelosi did her best. Republicans prevented it.
No,
what you're talking about, Joe, here is enormous loopholes within that in fact, it is not necessarily covering treatment for all people in America, and that people are going to be stuck with a bill unless we change that. And we're going to offer legislation to, in fact, change that.
If I may, I offered legislation. I laid out on my plan that it would cover exactly what is not covered by the House. I laid out in the plan that I laid out for how we would deal with this crisis. Nobody will pay for anything having to do with the crisis. This is a national emergency. There isn't a question of whether or not this is something that could be.
I have a suspicion. That Bernie's doesn't cover everyone. People might have to pay. I think he's talking about illegal immigrants who might have to pay if, you're not a fucking resident of the country. But if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But I have an inkling suspicion that's what the loophole is. You have to pay, or you don't have to pay if you're an American citizen. If you're not an American citizen, fuck you, which I'm actually okay with. So here we go.
Covered by insurance or anything else. We, out of the Treasury, are going to pay for this. It's a national emergency.
But you see,
that's what my plan calls for.
But the weakness of this is, let's just do a hypothetical. Family members diagnosed with the virus. Yep. Terrible tragedy, massive anxiety. The wife has the virus, the husband is a wreck, wants to go to a psychologist, wants to get counseling, doesn't have the money to do that. Maybe their kid breaks a leg. They don't have the money to go to health.
For the sweet love of God, we are dealing with a virus, and the socialist wants to talk about the mental state of the husband who, for all intents and purposes, should be working for his family. Newsflash, Bernie, Real men don't give a fuck about their mental state as long as they're making money and making ends meet for their family. They will gladly take whatever psychological damage they have to while their wife is sick so that they can keep shit floating. That's what real men do. Why the fuck are you going off in psychology for a fucking medical issue for people who are actually dying from a disease? Yeah. Ugh. Face wall.
Healthcare. So you're saying right now in the middle of a crisis, but you know what? Last year, at least 30,000 people died in America because they didn't get health care when they should.
And none of that bullshit has anything to do with psychology.
Because we don't have universal coverage. I think that's a crisis. 1 out of 5 people in America cannot afford the prescription drugs they need. They suffer. Some die. I consider that a crisis. Bottom line is, we need a simple system which exists in Canada, exists in countries all over the world. And that is, if you are an American, you get the health care you need. End of discussion. We can save huge sums of money doing that. The trick is, do we have the guts to take on the healthcare industry, some of which is funding the vice president's campaign? Do we have the courage?
Do we have the guts to face off on the pharmaceutical companies and healthcare industry? Yeah, like Donald Trump is already doing. But what you, Bernie Sanders, failed to do as a senator for the VA, while VA workers were wanking off the porn instead of helping the goddamn veterans. Fuck you, Bernie.
To take on the executives at the prescription drug industry, some of which, some of whom are funding his campaign.
Look, this is a national crisis. I don't want to get this into a back and forth in terms of our politics here. I've laid out a plan, building on Obamacare, providing a public option of Medicare that would cover everyone the same way. This idea that this is his only answer is a mistaken notion.
Holy shit, Biden is actually kicking his ass, pulling everything back and bringing it to a relatable point. The socialist is spurging, and the neocon, the neo-lib, is looking like gold. Holy shit.
But regardless of whether my plan was in place or his, this is a crisis. This is like we are being attacked from abroad. This is something that is of great consequence. This is like a war. And in a war, you do whatever is needed to be done to take care of your people. And what you do is and I have proposed it and laid it out in detail. Everything that you need in terms of dealing with this crisis would be free. It is paid for by the taxpayers generally. Generally. It has nothing to do with Bernie's Medicare for all. And by the way,
Vice President Biden, thank you. If I may, the Vice President just mentioned war. Would you deploy the U.S. military in effort to contain the virus? And if so, how?
Well, I think we use all of the tools that make sense. And if using the National Guard, which is folks, I think in New York State are already using the National Guard, that is something that has to be done. This is clearly, as the Vice President indicated, a national emergency. And what I worry about is not only how we respond aggressively to the virus, but also how we respond aggressively to the economic fallout of a global recession. So right now in Illinois and Ohio, if my memory is correct, the governor there has said they're closing down bars, they're closing down restaurants. What happens to the workers who are there? What happens to the millions of workers who may end up losing their jobs? So what I think we have got to do right now is if Trump can provide, or the Fed can provide $1.5 trillion for liquidity for the banks, well, we've got to say to every worker in America, you know what? Don't panic. You'll be able to pay your mortgage, Senator, because you're going to get a check. You're going to be made
Senator, we're going
whole.
to talk about the economic... Oh, go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
The answer is I would call out the military.
Okay.
Now, they have the capacity to provide this surge help that hospitals need and that is needed across the nation. I would make sure that they did exactly what they're prepared to do. They've done it. They did it in the Ebola crisis. They've done it. They have the capacity to build 500-bed hospitals and are in tents that are completely safe and secure and provide the help to get it done to anybody, this overflow. So it is a national emergency. I would call out the military.
Well, the Ebola crisis is one thing. This is obviously a pandemic, which is far more severe and impactful to this country. And I think one of the things that we want to remember here is that we got a lot of elderly people in this country who are told, stay home, don't leave your house. Who's going to get food to them? How do we get food to them? You got schools all over this country now being shut down, okay? How are we going to make sure that the kids do well in this crisis, not become traumatized? What do we do about the parents now who have to stay home?
All right. What child is traumatized because they got a week extension from spring break? Anyone else's kid traumatized? My kids are doing great. The kids are traumatized because they're not going to their government-approved institutions, for the love of God.
Home with the kids and can't go to work. So I think what bottom line here is that in this crisis, we have got to start paying attention to the most vulnerable. That includes people who are in prison right now, people who are in homeless shelters right now. What about the 500,000 people who are homeless tonight? Who's going to respond to them? Now, in 2008, when we had the Wall Street bailout, they did very well for the people on top. They bailed out the crooks on Wall Street. But they forgot about the suffering of ordinary Americans. This time around, let us learn that lesson. Let us pay attention to the working families in this country and to the most vulnerable.
We have learned that lesson. And again, I lay out in detail. What we should be doing now is we should be surging help to those places which are the most vulnerable. We should have every single person that's in a nursing home being able to be tested. We should be moving forces in to do that. We should move in the capability in to do that. We should be sitting down, the president should be sitting down in the Situation Room right now and do what we did before and asking the question, okay, you're going to close everything. Well, if you close everything, how do you get prescriptions that have to be filled? How do you make sure when you close that school, those children are going to be able to get the school food program? How do you make sure that you're going to be able to see to it that you get your mortgage paid? I propose that all of that be covered, and it's going to take a multi-billion-dollar program to do that. But first things first. The first thing is take care of the immediate needs we have now relating to surging the kind of capability we have to prevent this great bump in terms of how it's going to cause such pain, as well as moving in the direction of making sure we have long-term plans.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We're going to talk in a moment a lot more about the economic impact. But first, Senator Sanders, I want to ask about China. When this outbreak first started in China, the government there censored the whistleblower doctor who sounded the alarm and downplayed the true gravity of the virus.
Right.
Oh, this is going to be very, very spicy.
What consequences should China face for its role in this global crisis?
Well, one of the consequences is we have got to learn that you cannot lie to the American people. You cannot be less than frank about the nature of the crisis. And what bothers me very much is you have a president of the United States today, Mr. Trump, who is praising China for the good work that they are doing, when in fact, as you indicated, they were lying to their own people and allowing that virus to move much more aggressively than should have been the case. Look, I don't think this is the time for reclamation, to be punishing people. Now is the time, by the way, to be working with China. They are learning a lot about this crisis. And in fact, we have got to work with them. We've got to work with the World Health Organization. We've got to work with Italy. We've got to work with countries around the world. If there was ever a moment when the entire world is in this together, got to support each other, this is that moment.
That's why, if I may respond, that's why I insisted the moment this broke out that we should insist on having our experts in China to see what was happening and make it clear to China there'd be consequences if we did not have that access. And we have to lead the world. We should be the ones doing what we did during the Ebola crisis, bringing the whole world together and saying, this is what we must do. We have to have a common plan. All nations are affected the same way by this virus, depending on exposure. And so we need world leadership. We need international leadership. We need someone who knows how to bring the world together and insist on fundamental change in the way in which we're approaching this.
Biden is kicking ass. The neo-lib is completely trashing the mad socialist. This is great.
Senator Sanders?
Well, the bottom line here is that in the midst of this crisis, we have got to act in an unprecedented way. And that means every country on earth is going to be affected. Every country on earth has got to work together. It also means that we tell the pharmaceutical industry, we tell the big money interests that this is not a time for profiteering. This is a time for all of us working together. The World Health Organization is a very, very strong organization. It is sad that we have a president that has ignored the international community in so many ways, including in terms of international health crises.
Thank you, Senator Sanders.
Yawn.
Obviously, another part of this story is the economy, which is reeling from this pandemic. Many economists are warning of a recession. Just hours ago, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates to near 0%, which has not happened since the financial crisis in 2008. Vice President Biden, what would you do?
What I would do is make it clear to the world and make it clear to the United States that we are going to have a major, major, major bailout package, that we do not reward corporations. We reward individuals who, in fact, are really put to the test here. The problem is the policies of this administration economically we've eaten a lot of our seed corn here. The ability for us to use levers that were available before have been used up by this god-awful tax cut of $1.9 trillion, by the fact that we have used, the Fed will be of little consequence now. They've already used what leverage they have. And so we're going to have to just level with the American people. And here's the deal. We're going to have to not only deal with the immediate crisis, economic crisis, which is the most critical now, to let people know their mortgages are going to be paid, their rents are going to be paid, they're going to have child care, they're going to make sure that all their medical bills are cared for relating to this, et cetera. We have to go beyond that. And we're going to have to be in a situation where we're meeting on a daily basis, like we did in the middle of the financial crisis, to decide how we are going to find the wherewithal and the money to be able to see to it we hold all these folks harmless, but not do what Trump wants to do. For example, he came along and said, I got a great idea. You're going to tell
Senator
me?
Sanders.
The Ebola crisis, in
Oh,
my
wow.
view, exposes the dysfunctionality of our healthcare system and how poorly prepared we are despite how much money that we spend. And the Ebola crisis is also, I think, exposing the cruelty and the unjustness of our economy today. We have more income and wealth inequality in America today than any time in 100 years. And what that means that in the midst of this crisis, if you're a multimillionaire, no one's happy about this crisis. You're going to get through it. You're going to get everything you need. You're not worried about health care. You're not worried about income coming in. Half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. We got people who are struggling, working 2 or 3 jobs to put food on the table. What is going to happen to them? So the lesson to be learned is we have got to move aggressively right now to address the economic crisis as a result of Ebola, keep talking about Ebola. You got Ebola in my head here right now. As a result of the virus here, the coronavirus, what we have got to do also is understand the fragility of the economy and how unjust and unfair it is that so few have so much and so many.
That so few have so much. No. The reason that the economy is tanking is because we're invested globally rather than locally, Bernie. But you already sold your soul on the globalist agenda since you are now open borders. So I really don't want to hear about it. You know, the part of the solution is localizing the workforce, but you can't say that anymore, can you? You already sold your soul on that point.
Have so little.
People are looking for results, not a revolution.
Boom. Oh, that is a boom. That is a clip. People are looking for results, not a revolution. A fucking men, Biden. Oh, seriously, by the end of this debate, the socialists will be facing the wall. Amazing.
They want to deal with the results they need right now. And we can do that by making sure that we make everybody whole who has been so badly hurt. in terms of they lose the job, in terms of not having the ability to care for their children, in terms of the health care costs that they have related to this crisis. We can make them whole now, and put in process a system whereby they all are made whole. That has nothing to do with the legitimate concern about income equality in America. That's real. That's real. But that does not affect the need for us to act swiftly and very thoroughly and in concert with all the forces that we need to bring to bear to deal with the crisis now. So no one's thrown out of their home. No one loses their mortgage. No one is kicked out of their house. No one loses their paycheck. No one is in a position where they have a significant financial disability as a consequence of this of this particular crisis.
Thank you, Vice President. Senator Sanders.
Well, I think it goes without saying that as a nation, we have to respond as forcefully as we can to the current crisis. But it is not good enough not to be understanding how we got here and where we want to go into the future. So how does it happen that today, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, half of our people are scared to death? Good. I agree. In fact, that was my idea originally, to make sure that every person in this country is made whole as a result of this crisis. But God willing, this crisis is going to end. And we are going to have to develop an economy in which half of our people are not living paycheck to paycheck and struggling to put food on the table.
Well, at least Bernie knows to never waste a crisis. At least he knows that much, and he's admitting as such. But, I mean, you might want to hold your cards a little closer to the chest, Mr. Socialist.
I don't disagree with that. You were asking about the crisis.
You don't disagree, Biden? You don't disagree at all that, seizing the wealth, the means of production, having you just said people want results and not a revolution. Please tell me you disagree so that you might differentiate yourself from the anti-monopoly man, the Mr. Socialist on the other side of the dais.
What are we going to do about the crisis now, which is incredibly consequential to millions and millions of Americans? And it's not going to be solved by a change in tax policy now. It's not going to be solved by a change in how we deal with health care. It's got to be solved with an emergency need right now. Right now. What do we do? First thing we do is we make sure that health care is available by us having the tools to be able to deal with it, and that requires us to go out and do much more than this president has done in terms of planning. Secondly, it requires us to be in a position where we're anticipating what will happen in the next month or weeks in terms of the flow into the healthcare system by bringing the military along, more hospital beds, more training, more equipment to save the first responders as well. In addition to that, we then have to also look at what are the immediate needs right today. How about that person who's been laid off today? How about that person who doesn't have an income today? They have to know that tomorrow, when the paycheck comes due, you will get that paycheck.
I love it how we're talking about the literal physical health of people who are facing a pandemic virus. That's where we started, but now we're talking about people who are magically unemployed because of corona. Doesn't it just show you the whole focus of where their minds are at? Like, these people are clearly not equipped to handle or actually give a damn about your physical health. They want you to know that you're going to be financially okay. Your money's not going to save you from the virus. Take care of the virus first, dumbasses.
Paycheck. And thirdly, we have to think long-term about how we deal with making all those who have been badly damaged right again. And then we move on. Then we move on to change the economy in ways that are more profoundly necessary than people think, but do not respond to the immediate needs we have now. First things first.
Thank you, Vice President. Senator Sanders, you voted against bailouts following the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes.
Many believe those spending bills were a crucial part of stabilizing the economy back then. Would you support bailouts for industries that are being crushed by the coronavirus outbreak now?
I did you're quite right. I voted against the bailout because I believed that the illegal behavior being done by the people on Wall Street should not be rewarded by a bailout. And today, by the way, those banks are more prosperous and own more assets, by and large, than they did back then. They're bigger now than they were then. I thought at the time that in the midst of massive income and wealth inequality, the people on top, through a surtax on the very wealthy, should bail out. And it's not just the talk bailout. We gave trillions of dollars in zero-interest loans to large banks. But to answer your question, where we are right now, we need to stabilize the economy. But we can't repeat what we did in 2008. Joe voted for that. I voted against it because we have got to do more than save the banks or the oil companies. Our job right now is to tell every working person in this country, no matter what your income is, you are not going to suffer as a result of this crisis of which you had no control.
Vice President Biden.
Had those banks all gone under, all those people Bernie says he cares about would be in deep trouble. Deep, deep trouble. All those little folks. We'd have gone out of business. They'd find themselves in a position where they would lose everything that they had in that bank, whether it was $10 or $300 or a savings account. This was about saving an economy, and it did save the economy. And the banks paid back, and they paid back with interest. I agree with Bernie. Some of them should have gone to jail. That was the big disagreement I had in terms of bailing out. But the question was, they paid back. In addition to that, it also, part of that was bailing out the automobile industry, saving thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of jobs over time. He voted against that as well.
No, I did not vote against that. That bailout money was used later on by Bush to protect the automobile industry. But here's the point. One minute. Here's the point here, is that in terms of that bailout, there are ways that you can bail out when you have a handful of people who have incredible wealth, who have prospered off of the illegal behavior of individuals, in this case on Wall Street. You know what you say to them? You want to, and I did. I said this to the Secretary of Treasury. You want to bail out? That's fine. You have your friends pay for it, not working people. The other point is, as Joe should know, it wasn't just the $700 billion TARP program. The Fed gave trillions and trillions of dollars in zero-interest loans to every financial institution in this country and central banks all over the world. That was essentially a grant because they then could sell that. They can then bring in interest rates much greater than the zero-interest loans that they got.
Vice President Biden.
Look, the fact of the matter is that if, in fact, the banks had all been gone under, we would be in a Great Depression. We would have not. How do you get out of that? Now, Bernie's saying that I guess he's going to do a wealth tax or something, that the top 1% could pay for everything, and they should pay for everything that occurred. We were talking about tens and hundreds of billions of dollars. That's what this was about. And the fact was that it saved the economy from going into a depression. After we passed the Recovery Act, which I was the one who went out and got the 3 votes to get it changed, that had $900 billion in it and was the thing that kept us from going into a Great Depression.
Vice President Biden, I'm going to stay with you. Many of the 11 million undocumented immigrants and now even many...
All right, so now they're they're bragging about how much of your tax dollars they're giving away. That takes some balls. But now we're getting to illegal immigrants. So, pushing on forward.
Many legal immigrants in the United States are afraid to seek medical help. How do you ensure they feel safe enough to get treatment to help stop the spread of coronavirus?
First off, they shouldn't feel safe. They should be absolutely terrified. They should be shaking in their boots to step into an American hospital because they don't belong here. That is the natural and wholesome response. But let's see what old senile neo-lib says about it.
Anyone who shows up to be tested for coronavirus or gets coronavirus and is treated would be held harmless. Just like I've argued all along, any woman who crosses the border or is here and being beaten by her husband, but she's an undocumented, She cannot be deported because she reports. There are certain things you cannot deport an undocumented alien for, an undocumented person for, and that would be one of them. We want that. It's in the interest of everyone. And those folks who are the xenophobic folks out there, it's even in their interest that that woman come forward or that man come forward, because it deals with keeping the spread from moving more rapidly.
Please explain to me why a woman being beat on the other side of the border is a national security issue in my country. Anytime.
They will not, should not, under any circumstances, be held accountable and be deported for that purpose. Period.
I have been criticized because the proposal for Medicare for All that I introduced includes making sure that undocumented people are also covered.
And rightfully so.
And right now, we have the absurd situation where undocumented people who try to do the right thing, they're sick, they want to go to the doctor, they don't want to spread this disease, are now standing and thinking about whether ICE is going to deport them.
Yes. Yes, because ICE should deport them. They have every reason to be afraid because they are not here legally. You should be afraid of the law when you break it.
So one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that everybody feels comfortable getting the health care that they need. That should be a general principle above and beyond the coronavirus. Second of all, we've got to end these terrible ICE raids, which are terrorizing communities all over this country. And thirdly, to answer you.
Wow, we need to end ICE raids. Why not just cease all police activity in this investigation whatsoever? I mean, shit, these terrible law enforcement officers investigating crimes in their own country. God, how dare they? How dare they?
Your question. The time is long overdue for this country to move to comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship for those 11 million undocumented. And furthermore, on day one as president, I would restore the legal status of the 1.8 million.
Senator, thank you. We're going to talk about
undocumented.
immigration in a minute, but first I want to ask about something that's going on right now. Again, back to this crisis. We know that people over the age of 60 and those with underlying medical conditions, especially heart disease, lung disease, and
Guys, I tried. I really tried, but I cannot do one more minute of this. Thank you for listening. This is the Carnal Conservative, guys. I will see you later. Have a great day. Bye.